Hey everyone, I'm excited to spend the next half an hour chatting with you about a topic which I'm super excited about, which is labor in your business. So we'll just wait a couple minutes for folks to join and then we'll kick off. If you've got any questions, fire those into the chat and we'll have some time at the end. But if everyone wants to start off just by saying hey in the chat, I'd love to hear about where you guys are dialing in from today. All right. So most of you will know labor is more expensive and less flexible and harder to deploy well than almost any other cost in a restaurant. But the part I want to focus on today isn't about what labor actually costs. Everyone already knows wages have gone up, right? The hardest part is really understanding what people on your roster are actually spending their time doing, especially during the busiest parts of your service. Because the answer can't always be to just take a person off the roster, right? You still got to serve your customers, you still got to make food, you still got to turn tables and solve problems and all that sort of stuff. So this session today is really about protecting that really scarce staff time. And so we're going to look at where labor pressure is coming from, where time actually leaks out of your shifts without showing up in your numbers, and where you can use tech to take some of that repetitive work out without actually taking the hospitality out. So right up front, this is not a pitch for a restaurant with no staff in it. I don't think anybody actually wants that. This is really a practical look at how you can make sure your people are available to do the most important jobs at the right time. So before we get into numbers though, I'll just give you a little bit of quick context on who I am and why do I care so deeply about this problem. So these days, I'm the co-founder and chief AI officer at Otto. We work on AI phone agents for restaurants. Before that, I spent a bunch of my life running Macca's restaurants, and labor was always one of our biggest operating challenges. So you got a sales forecast, you got a roster, but then you got reality, right? So reality is when a bus arrives at the wrong time when you're not expecting it. People are calling in sick, a rush is happening earlier than you expected, or maybe a quiet period is lasting a bit longer than you expected. And we didn't solve that problem by just taking people off the roster and hoping for the best. We used processes, training, and the best tech that we had available. And we tried to make the standard jobs really easy to perform and train people so they could jump between different stations when that was needed. And most importantly, we tried to protect the strongest people on our team for the moments where it mattered the most, and we really needed their judgment. So the tech's changed a lot since then, but that operating principle, I think, really hasn't. So I now get to see these patterns across a wide range of different hospo businesses, from large, really busy ones through to smaller regional owner-operator venues. So with that operator lens, I want to spend some of our time today looking at what changed in 2026 and how some of these things can be done now that we couldn't actually do before. So today is about 3 practical things. First up, where labor leaks out of a restaurant through routine interruptions. And these are things that never appear in their own roster line. The second one is how to size up the cost and the revenue risk of you using your own venue data rather than just grabbing a generic benchmark. And the third is how you would protect your staff time for the stuff that customers will actually remember. So think about hospitality, things that require judgment, recovering customers, and customer delight moments. We'll use the phone as an example and the front counter, but this also applies to any other kind of repetitive work that collides with the peak service in your venue. So we're halfway through 2026 already, and we've got some new challenges to deal with. The first full pay period after July 2026, the minimum award rate actually increased by 4.75%. This is Australia, by the way. Minimum wage has moved up to $26.44 an hour, which is just over $1,000 a week. And the super guarantee rate stays the same at 12%, but payday supers changed the timing. So super now moves along with the pay cycle, and contributions need to drop into their account within 7 business days. So the point here is not that wages should be lower, right? I think people should be paid fairly for what they do. The point here is that the margin for sloppy or wasteful labor use has gone, if there ever was any margin there. And restaurants are really particularly exposed to this because so much of the work is tied to awards, trading periods, and customer demand that moves around all the time from 1 hour to the next. So if you're already tight, these changes here are going to make it even tighter. And if a capable team member is spending Friday night answering the same menu questions 15 times, that interruption costs a bunch more than what it did last year, even though it still looks like a really small task. So yeah, this added cost pressure really matters, but the bigger problem is flexibility. Food cost moves, generally speaking, along with your sales, right? So if you don't sell a steak, you haven't used the steak. Labor doesn't work like that. You can't just switch off a roster because Tuesday turned out to be quiet. And you can't instantly just add 3 excellent team members because Friday got busy all at once. People arrive in shifts which you've pre-designed, and demand arrives whenever it feels like it. It moves with days of the week, weather, local events, school holidays, walk-ins, stuff like that. On a quiet day, you've committed to labor before you know exactly how that demand's going to land. If people are underused, that cost becomes margin loss. On a busy night, everyone's already deployed, and that's when a phone call or a basic booking question or a simple order correction can turn into a service failure, because that interruption lands right at the moment where the team has no spare attention. So the productivity opportunity isn't automatically fewer people, it's fewer low value interruptions, fewer avoidable handoffs, and less time spent on work that doesn't actually equate to hospitality. If you start with a question like, how do I cut the roster? You tend to remove capacity, but the actual work still stays there. So we should start instead with what work shouldn't be on the roster. I think that's a much more useful starting question. And to answer that, it means we've got to look beyond the roster report, right? Because a lot of this waste never actually appears in its own line. So these are just some of the places where labor tends to leak without anybody really measuring it. Phone calls, front counter order entry, menu questions, opening hours questions, booking queries. None of these on their own sounds enormous, right? A 2-minute phone call is just a 2-minute phone call. A customer asking about a gluten-free option, it's just one question. A delivery driver looking for an order, it's just a very quick, brief interruption. But operationally, these things don't all arrive individually, one at a time in a quiet room. They all land on the same people during the peak service window, and those people are already trying to serve customers. So now if you think about your strongest floor person or your most experienced manager, they're the person that everyone goes to because they know the menu, they understand the systems, and they can make a decision. It also means that that person becomes the default capture layer for everything that the restaurant hasn't designed a different path for. So the phone rings and that person is the one that answers it. An order needs fixing, that person comes and steps in. Somebody wants to know whether you open on a Sunday, they're the ones that answer it. So these individual tasks, again, they're really small, but the switching cost isn't. Every interruption takes attention away, creates another restart, and increases the chance that something happening in the background gets missed. So we should start asking if this task genuinely needs a person, and if it does it need to be this person right now? The phone is a really good place to start because we can already see the mix of demand quite clearly. So this is data from Otto, our AI voice agent, across January in 2026. So we took a sample of 3,000 calls that happened during January. And the interesting thing here is the mix of calls and also how they were handled. So about 46% were related to orders. And this is a perfect case for AI since it can handle so many calls at the same time and it knows the full menu inside and out. And it's actually a lot more accurate than humans. So around 32% were general inquiries, opening hours, menu questions, ingredients, delivery options, and the list goes on and on and on, right? And again, AI does a really, really great job of answering all of this stuff. And then there was inquiries about reservations, cancellations, and other things. AI can do a really good job of, and it can then hand off to a staff member when it needs to. So not every call needs automation with AI from start to finish. But if you start with an agent and then you make it really, really easy to hand off to a team member, you'll actually reduce most of those interruptions in service significantly. Most questions, reservations, orders, and stuff like that are really predictable. But sometimes you get those exceptions, like an allergy-heavy order, or a cranky customer, or an unusual request, and they'll go through to a person, and that's completely fine. Good automation isn't about refusing to involve humans. It's about handling the standard path really, really well and recognizing early enough the exceptions and routing them properly. In our data here, 70% of these calls were actually fully handled without a human transfer. And the remaining transfers were driven by things like a venue specific policy or a same day booking request or a caller explicitly asking to speak with a team member. And that shows us there's a meaningful amount of repetitive stuff that can be absorbed. So the labor question is now, should your staff be the first entry point for every routine call, or should they be the fallback for the calls that actually need them? So want to take a quick look at Italico now, one of our great customers in Sorrento, down on Victoria's Mornington Peninsula. Italico is a 260-seat restaurant, really large venue with a big seasonal demand. Their busy period runs from November right through till Easter, with a really intense stretch around the summer holidays. So for the owner down there, Marco, the phone was a really important channel, but it was also a bottleneck. When they got busy, the calls would stack up and every call would pull someone away from service. But ignoring the phone also meant ignoring genuine customer demand. Marco was really interested in AI, but he was cautious. He didn't want something that would just answer the phone, but create another disconnected process. After Otto went live in there, he told us the moment that it clicked was when the phone wasn't ringing in the venue, but orders kept on coming through. The goal here was to keep the phone order channel working while the team could stay focused in the venue. And for Italico, that phone order channel is worth around 150K a year, so quite significant. So this isn't just a labor efficiency play. It's also about protecting demand that already exists. And importantly as well, Marco said that his regular customers responded really well to it. And that's the balance you're looking for. You want less interruptions during the shift, so your people are available for genuine hospitality, but it's not a one size fits all. Your venue may have a much smaller phone channel than this, or you might have a completely different labor leak. So I use 5 questions to look for a labor leak. You want to pick a task that you see happening in your venue and ask, how often does this task happen? So something that takes 30 seconds but happens a couple of hundred times can matter a lot more than a 10-minute task that only happens once. You want to look second at the peak timing. Does it collide with the busiest part of service? A job that's harmless at 3 in the afternoon can be really, really expensive if it's happening at 7 p.m. on a Friday night. The third is, does it genuinely really need a person? So does it need judgment, warmth, physical presence, responsibility, or is it just a task that just so happens that it's done by a person today? Then there's revenue risk. So what happens if this task is delayed, if it's missed, or if it's done badly? Does it mean you lose an order or you disappoint a customer? Or do you consume a manager's time later on? And fifth is the automation fit. So can a system handle the standard path consistently and hand off the exceptions? So that final part is important. You're not asking whether a system can handle every possible scenario. You're asking whether it can remove enough predictable work to protect your staff's time without hiding the moments where a person should step in. So those 5 questions will give you a much better brief than just, we need some AI. So let's take a look at an example of what does it look like with some tasks. So let's start with phone orders, right? They happen often in peak on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday evening. They sometimes need a person, but standard orders are usually very structured. The revenue risk is quite high because a missed call can mean a missed order. So the first fix is reliably answering with a clear escalation path. Menu questions are different. They're frequent, and many of them don't need a person. The first fix for this one might not be AI at all. It may just be you need clearer information, a better menu, proper FAQs on your website. Counter orders, they happen during lunch and dinner. Some need help, but like phone orders, a large share of them follow the same repeatable path. So that makes routine service a reasonable case for kiosks, provided you got a person sticking around that can help customers. And bookings, they tend to happen before service or close to the booking time, right? So the fix for this might be really clear booking rules, a link that customers can use themselves to book, or using an AI phone agent that can take the booking or hand off if the request falls outside of your rules. Your venue might have a completely different pattern. The point here is to actually name the work. Saying we have a labor problem is just way too broad to act on. So you got to get really specific. So you joined along today to chat about AI. So let's chat directly about where AI fits. So for phone demand, an AI phone agent can answer inbound calls, deal with common menu and venue questions, capture booking intent, and it can even take orders and payments. At the front counter, kiosks or customer self-service, that can move routine ordering away from a staff-reliant point-of-sale process. In both of these cases, the principle is still the same. 80-20 rule, handle 80% of the repeatable work with a system and keep your people visible for judgment, customer delight, and relationships. So that means any complex orders, difficult questions, or special requests, you got to have a good handoff built into whatever process you create. You want real customer complaints to be able to reach a person at the right time. You want an upset customer to be able to speak to somebody without getting trapped in a loop. If you've got an elderly customer, they need to be able to get help if they look like they need it. And you got to decide what work belongs on the standard path and what the system is allowed to do and what it should escalate to a team member. So this is an operating problem which we're working on quite a lot with Otto, particularly around the phone, but also with other channels as well. And if you do something where it saves you labor, but it's damaging your customer experience, then it means you haven't really solved the right problem. If you think the phone looks like a meaningful leak in your venue, we got a free audit that's on our website. It can give you a really good starting point. So, and you can use those results as a prompt for further investigation. The useful inputs there are things like the call volume, how many calls you're missing, and your average order value. And the output that it will give you is the demand at risk. So your next job will be to verify that against the way customers actually behave in your venue. Give you another thing that you can take home. On Monday morning, jump into your back of house systems and export a week of your sales by hour. Export your roster, labor hours, and then add any activity data you can get that you suspect is causing interruptions. That might be phone calls, counter transactions, bookings from your booking system, refunds, remakes, deliveries from your aggregator platforms, and then get that task list that you had from your labor leak audit questions. Give all of that information into an AI tool you already use. So pick your favorite, Claude or GPT, whatever it might be, and then ask it to find the hours where labor looks really high relative to your sales. Get it to identify tasks that collide with peak service. Separate work that needs judgment from work that needs a standard path. Suggest 3 changes that you can test without reducing service quality. And for each of those changes, get the AI to give you evidence, likely cause, and action, and how you should measure it. You still want to check the output because the AI doesn't know the full context of your venue, right? Only you know that. And it can make some incorrect assumptions, but it's a really great starting point to help you interrogate a set of operating data, compare patterns, and help you to form better questions. So you want to do this before you take any product demos. It gives you a really clear problem statement and a baseline. Then when somebody wants to show you a kiosk or a phone agent or a rostering tool or some other system, you can ask whether it solves the problem that you actually have. Then you're not just buying AI for the sake of AI, you're buying a measurable improvement to a specific part of your operation. So I've just chewed your ear off about labor leaks hiding in plain sight. Next week, my good friend Natalia is running a session about extra revenue streams hiding in plain sight. Natalia works with a bunch of different restaurant operators and really knows her stuff. So I hope that you can find the time to join Natalia next week. As we start to wrap up today and make some time for questions, I want to hark back to one of the first things I said. The goal here isn't to create a restaurant with fewer people. The goal is a restaurant where people spend more time doing things customers actually remember. So that's welcoming people properly, recognizing a regular, noticing a table needs help before they have to ask, recovering a problem that requires judgment. That kind of personalization is difficult when the team is constantly being pulled into repetitive tasks. So you want to let systems handle the repetition where they can, and keep people available for hospitality judgment and customer delight. Start by finding the leaks. Figure out your standard path and the exceptions, and then choose the tech that can help, not the other way around. If you remember one question from today, I think it should be this. What are my busiest people doing during my busiest hour that genuinely doesn't need them? Okay. That'll usually lead you to a much more useful labor conversation than just who can come off the roster. Thank you for joining me today. I'm here live, so I'm keen to get into a couple of questions that you guys have. All right, we've got a couple questions here. A couple from Jamie. First one, how does the handoff work? Great question. So it really depends on your venue. So Otto will try and handle all of the orders and everything it has knowledge for. But if the customer specifically asks, hey, can I speak with a team member? Otto's going to listen to that and transfer it right away. You might also set up some specific transfer rules. Say, for example, you might have a really complex menu and you might have something which you just want staff to handle. You can put an override into Otto and say, every time this specific case happens, I want you to transfer it. So I'll give you an example. We've got a customer where they've got some regulars and the regulars are gonna pull into the car park around the back of the restaurant and call up to say, "Hey, I'm here. Can you run my order out for me?" So that's quite a special niche use case. And so they can set up an override to say when one of these regulars calls, it's just going to transfer it to the restaurant. They can speak with a team member and they can run the order out. But yeah, it's really up to your venue, and I think that's one of the things which is really important as we're building out these workflows is to always have the option of a human in the loop. Because while AI can do a heap of stuff, and a lot of it actually better than a human, you want to preserve that human in the loop for people who really need it. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Jamie. Uh, which type of calls do you transfer to a human? I think we're kind of. I'm hoping that I've covered that in the previous answer. Yeah, it's really up to your venue. One thing that I will add when the transfer happens, which we get asked a little bit, is what does it sound like in the venue? So when Otto transfers a call, it'll do what we call a warm transfer. So Otto will actually speak to the staff member that picks up the phone and say, "Hey, I've got a customer. They want to pick up their order out the back, connecting them now." So your staff are going into the call with a little bit of context. So yeah, hopefully that helps, Jamie. Um, all right, question from Katie. What does the agent sound like? Again, this is up to you. So we've built Otto to be quite customizable. We've got a bunch of voices to choose from, which sound really great. A bunch of different accents and things like that. And you can also record your own. You can also record your own voice and do a voice clone of yourself or a manager, or a team member, to put into Otto, which we've got a couple in there that you can choose from. And as far as the tone and the way that Otto responds, we've made it out of the box to be a really helpful staff member, in the way that you would want. And you can add extra layers of customization on top of that with things like overrides and venue context. So Otto will act really friendly and helpful by default as a personality, but you can add extra prompting and things like that to customize it further. So I hope that helps, Katie. But if there's any more questions about this kind of stuff, we've got a website and an email address, hello@callotto.ai. Or you can follow me on LinkedIn, right? I don't do regular posts, but when I do, hopefully it's going to be valuable about this kind of stuff. Yeah, if there's no other questions from the chat, I hope everyone got something from today. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you on the webinar next week with Natalia.